Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Creepy Fox Podcast, the show in the series where we go ahead and relive and retell subscriber stories that have been sent in by all of you. And do we have another good one for y'all today? This time we'll be covering some scary stories from wintertime, so you'll want to go ahead and make sure you keep yourself warm because these stories are sure going to give you all the chills. But hey, just wanted to quickly remind you all before we get started with today's episode. For the rest of December and this month only, I'll be having the Christmas Holiday Fox available for purchase. This is available in shirts, stickers, sweaters, coffee mugs, you name it. You can find it right below the video player. It's a great way to support the channel, as well as being able to rock some awesome Christmas and holiday designs for this time of the year. And then the last thing, if you're new around here and you haven't seen it, I'm running a St. Jude's charity for children's research for raising money and awareness for cancer patients. If that's something you're interested in and you want to help out, then check it out right below the video player. Even $1 goes a long way if everybody were to donate $1. But of course, it's optional. Anyways, let's go ahead and get started with today's episode. Enjoy! This happened in 2014, and it remains to be one of the more gnarly things that's ever happened to me, or my wife. It really just goes to show you how insane life can really be. To get you started with some context, this takes place in a small rural Pennsylvania town, and it was December of that year. My wife was at work, she's a nurse, and I was at home on my day off, decorating the house with Christmas lights, as well as in other assortments of Christmas decorations. The time was roughly 6 p.m., and it's a chilly but tolerable mid-30s in temperature. I had the radio on in my garage playing Christmas classics, and with the light snow falling as well, everything was relatively peaceful. I started off by decorating the back entrance of the house first, since that's where we normally enter our home. We do have a front entrance and a front door, but at the time, the door was having issues of getting stuck, but that's not really important to my story. As I was on top of my ladder, hanging the Christmas lights on the small nails that had been placed there from years past, I just so happened to look to the side. It was a bit hard to make out, but I could have sworn I saw the shape of a large man behind some trees. We have a small set of woods that our backyard slowly but surely extends into, with a small fence separating us from said tree line. I had to do a double take as I focused my attention back to the lights, and when I'm staring back again, the figure I saw was missing. I thought it to be a bit bizarre, but as it was dark and I had been looking at lights this whole time, I wrote it off as my eyes playing tricks on me, and I focused my attention back to decorating. Fast forward approximately 20 minutes later, and I head back into the garage, music still playing, so I could go take a drink out of my thermos containing some home-brewed coffee. It was practically empty. Well, that was a shame, but not the end of the world. I now head into the kitchen, through the door in the garage, so I can go and make some fresh coffee to keep warm. That coffee was delicious, but now there was something else I needed to take care of. My bladder. It was practically yelling at me to go take a leak. So as not to upset it, I head to the restroom to take care of my business. Here's when something happened that caught my attention. I hear what sounds like footsteps shuffling on the carpet, which is in the living room, since the hallway I just entered from is wooden floor. I remember looking at my phone and seeing that it was roughly the time my wife would be back home. That's why I quickly hurried up so I could surprise my wife and give her a hug, plus ask her if there was anything she wanted me to make her to eat since I was certain she was exhausted. Here's the thing. Once I exit the restroom and I call out my wife's name, I get nothing in return. Honey, where are you? How was work? Crickets. Radio silence. Now I knew that I had heard footsteps. So she had to be home, right? I started to grow a bit paranoid, but then I slapped myself in the face a few seconds later, saying I'm letting my imagination get to me, and this is just one whole big misunderstanding. But boy, was I to get a sudden realization when I reached the door in the kitchen that would lead me back outside. That door was open. Now, considering the heater was on in the house, I made sure to close the door behind me before entering my home. That was one thing I knew I did for sure. Again, I called out my wife's name, thinking she was playing a trick on me. But again, silence. This time, I went ahead and gave my wife a call, to which she answered me pretty quickly. She essentially explains that she was actually on her way back home and was going to be arriving with a delicious pepperoni pizza. That did sound exciting, but that wouldn't cover the fear and sudden realization of what I was hearing in my home. Suddenly, chills began to run down my spine, as I fear the worst, that somebody had broken into my home, and that shadow I saw outside a while ago wasn't my imagination. So you might ask yourself, what did I do? Did I run out of the house and get my neighbors to help me? Did I call the police and tell them of a potential home burglar? The answer? I went to investigate myself, but not before telling my wife to wait outside the house and explain to her that I thought somebody was in here. She told me she'd call the cops meanwhile, and I know I should have waited for their arrival, but something else I was aware of is that they would take a while to get to me. So I went to grab my pistol, which I remembered in that moment was left in my truck's glove compartment. Pistol now in hand, I returned back into the house and start to do a scan of every room. Nothing in the kitchen, emptiness in the restroom, and the guest bedroom lay dormant as it was being currently used for storage. Now the only room that remains, ours. With a quick inhale and exhale, I kick the door open and I point my pistol in every direction. Nothing. But how could this be? I started to curse at myself and I said, "Man, I'm such an idiot. I'm letting the sounds of my old home get to me." Just imagine the story I would have to tell the cops that this old man got scared because of noise and because he thought he saw a shadow person in the woods. Well, everything changes when I just so happened to walk over to the dresser which had my phone charger that I wanted to grab. With my back turned against the room, I heard the distinct sound of the closet door opening. That was followed by someone whispering and cursing. I remember looking back, and who I saw not only angered me, but gave me the chills as well. It was this man, and not just any ordinary man, my wife's ex-husband, who actually had a restraining order placed against him some time ago. In his grasp was one of the largest knives I'd ever seen, similar to what you might witness hunters carrying around. Those next moments went into slow motion, and I remember the thought in my mind going, is this freak actually going to come charging at me with that knife, and will I have to shoot him dead? While yes, I had the right to defend myself, I surely didn't want things to come to that conclusion. I remember taking a step back and telling him that if he dared make any sudden movements, he was a dead man. He now started to make up these random excuses and saying these random things, still with knife in hand by the way, as he continued to inch his way closer. Okay, freak, one more step and you're dead. Thank God that it seemed like even he realized he was in the wrong, because he drops the knife, then storms out of my room. I ended up chasing him out of my house, and what I see driving down the street was such a stress reliever. It was the cops. Needless to say, they ended up catching my wife's ex-husband, and they ended up taking him into custody. My wife was pretty spooked. I mean, it's not every day your wife's ex-husband breaks into your house with a knife, completely ignoring the restraining order, and it did take quite a few weeks for my wife to once again feel comfortable anytime we were home. Not that I could really blame her. So that's the story. Since this incident, we have never had any encounters with her ex-husband again, thank the Lord, and life has been treating us fairly well since. As a reminder, please stay safe everyone. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and a blessed New Year. This happened in 2017 during my school's winter break. I was home bored and I was watching some reruns of SpongeBob on television. During one of the commercial breaks, I decided to text one of my friends, Alex. I asked him what he was doing and if he had any plans. He says why not come over, as him and his parents were going to be baking cookies later that evening and watching some Christmas movies too. Sounded like a pretty good plan. At least it beats staying in my room and doing nothing. So I grabbed my scooter, told my parents, and then I made the 10-minute ride over to Alex's house. We spent the whole day playing video games, and sure enough, in the evening we baked a different assortment of cookies. Peanut butter, chocolate chip, sugar, all the delicious flavors. By 8 p.m., we were all sitting on the living room couch watching the Charlie Brown Christmas special. This was when Alex comes up with a brilliant idea. Hey, do you want to set up a tent outside in the backyard and have a sleep over there? Bear in mind, even though this was the end of December, it was actually pretty warm that evening. One of the downers, I guess you could say, about living in Southern California. This was that one year with the record temperatures. Alex's parents were cool about it, and they even helped us set up the tent. It was one that Alex's dad used to use back in the day when he would go camping with some of his buddies and they'd have some beers and sit around a campfire. The tent was very well insulated, and it offered enough space for us to stretch and move around in peace. So we ended up setting up next to Alex's backyard tree, which is also next to their shed and the backyard fence. After about 20 minutes, Alex's parents head back inside to get some rest, as Alex and I stay up for the next couple of hours, playing video games on our Nintendo 3DS and watching dumb videos on our phones. By midnight, we each slowly started to drift off to sleep, and before I knew it, I knocked out cold. Fast forward a couple of hours later, and I'm suddenly awoken to the sounds of shuffling footsteps. My eyes were still closed at this moment, so I didn't see what was actually happening at first. I assumed Alex had gotten up or was walking about. However, once I opened my eyes, I see Alex is fast asleep, snoring like a lion. Well, that's pretty weird. It was a bit windy that evening, but the noise I was hearing wasn't wind. I sat there in silence for another few seconds as I hear footsteps begin to approach the tent. Suddenly, the zipper begins to move, and I let out a nervous chuckle. Silly me. It must be Alex's parents coming to check up on us. How nice of them. That wasn't the case. Before I knew it, I'm face to face with one of the strangest looking individuals I'd ever seen in my life. It was an older lady, at least what it looked to be. I would say mid to late 40s. Her hair was covering her face. Her large oversized coat was a mess, and I instantly got this awful smell of garbage. I let out a nervous yelp, which now woke up Alex. Hey dude, what's going on? Before he gets to finish the rest of his sentence, he too lets out a confused tone, as both of us ask this lady who she was and what she was doing here. The lady proceeded to take a seat next to us and says she was cold and wanted to take a break from the weather. Well, remember I said it wasn't that cold that evening? It was true. It was in the upper 60s. Plus, she was all bundled up, not sure what she was talking about it being cold. If anything, you'd think she would be too warm. It was strange. I mean, how did this lady get into the backyard in the first place? She would have had to have climbed over the fence. Alex tries to ask her why she came into the tent apart from it being cold, and she snaps back at us. She then proceeded to pull a glass pipe from out of one of her coat pockets, and she began to light it up. Well, that explains things. She's a junkie. Alex and I took one look at each other as we tell ourselves this lady might be unstable, and who's to know if she might be armed with a weapon? You just don't know. We decided at this moment to finally get out of the tent and get Alex's parents. It's just too bad this would be when things would begin to escalate further. You see, you are able to open the tent on the back side as well. That's how we chose to exit. The only thing is, once it's my turn to get out, since Alex was now waiting for me, I suddenly feel this tight grasp on my leg. This lady has a tight hold of me, and let me tell you, it's like she had superhero strength. She basically pulled me back with what was like no effort, as Alex then grabs onto me and pulls me toward him. I was telling the lady to let go, but she wouldn't, instead telling me to shut up or she would stab me in the leg. Her saying that was super freaky. I knew at this moment there was no snapping sense into this woman, so with all my might, I used my other leg to kick at her, which now causes her to let go. I then dive toward freedom, and Alex and I begin to run. The crazy lady then proceeds to give chase, as she's yelling at me saying she was going to kill me. Thank the Lord we make it through the back door just before she has a chance to cause any further damage. Well, at least not to us. The door wasn't so lucky. She began to kick at said door, and scream too, saying that we needed to let her in, and all this other strange nonsense that came out of her mouth. Alex and I went to wake up his parents, who then come charging down the stairs toward the kitchen. The lady was still there, talking to herself, and now trying to pry open the door with a small pocket knife. That was so scary. Suddenly, the threat of the leg stabbing being true gave me chills. Alex's dad tells the lady to get lost, and after what seemed like an eternity, she does leave. Of course, Alex's mom did call the cops as his dad spoke to the lady. Officers did manage to catch up with the woman, and after taking our statements, the lady did get apprehended and was put in the back of a police cruiser and taken away. We never heard anything back from the police, even after they asked for our phone numbers and said they'd call us back if they needed any further information. Talk about one of the scariest moments of our lives. We decided there and then never to camp outside again, choosing instead to stay indoors and watch movies from the safety of our bedrooms. Although winter and Christmas time is supposed to be a season of joy and happiness, it does unfortunately come with its fair share of creepiness and scary moments too. This story that I'm sharing here on the Creepy Fox channel is the first time I've ever told anybody my scary story outside of family or friends. I really want this to act as a learning lesson to all of you out there. You have to be extremely cautious with the people you meet. Don't get me wrong, for every bad person there are like hundreds of good persons, but it always has to be that one individual who ruins everything. And it sucks too, because before this happened to me, I used to be very open and an extroverted kind of girl. But I digress. Let's go back to the year 2017. December had just arrived, and finals would soon be taking over my sleep schedule as I stayed up late to ensure I studied all the materials I was assigned. Apart from schooling, however, I had taken up a little job working at one of those little Christmas tree places that sells Christmas trees in shopping center parking lots. I know you're aware of what I'm talking about. At any time, it would be roughly 4 or 5 of us working, someone leading the group, then of course the regulars like me, helping customers pick out their trees and even assisting with loading said trees into their vehicles. It definitely made for a nice break between school. Anyway, about a week after I'd begun and finals were taking place at the same time, somebody new had started to work there. I'm not going to use his real name, for obvious reasons, so we'll just call him Francis. Francis was an older gentleman, early 40s, who sort of reminded me of an uncle, due to his large beer belly, receding hairline, scruffy beard, and short stature. Things between us started off fairly innocently. He would talk to me in between customers, and he was pretty friendly, albeit he did get a bit flirty. I ended up having to tell him during one of our shifts that I was only interested in being friends, as he actually tried to ask me out. He even did it while some coworkers were standing around. It was a bit awkward, that's for sure. Fast forward a few more shifts, and I'm having to do my best to be away from Francis. He's getting to the point of annoyance, and him constantly asking me out to go on a date was interfering with my work. Yeah, I guess I could have said something, but I didn't want to bring attention to myself. If only I had listened to my intuition. A couple of shifts later, finals were already over, and it's a week before Christmas. Francis was missing that night, and I thought, nice, I can work in peace and not get interrupted. So it went, until after I clocked out. I went to the nearby Subway to pick myself up a sandwich, and as I waited to pay, lo and behold, Francis enters the store. The dude acts like he hadn't seen me in months, and he gives me one of the most awkward hugs I'd ever received. Even the Subway employee looked at me and saw the look of frustration over my face. He could tell I was feeling uncomfortable. Francis luckily ends up letting go soon after the hug, and then gets in line to order his food. One thing was for sure, I wasn't sticking around to talk to Francis. Now I just need to make it to my car. But then I realized I'd forgotten to ask for some napkins. I foolishly returned back in, only for Francis to get the idea that I was returning and waiting for him. Francis now begins to follow me to my car, while I'm just going, yeah, that's cool. Francis was now about to do something so unexpected that would then lead to one of the scariest moments of my life some days later. Francis grabs me by the arm, pulls me in, and then tries to kiss me. I managed to move my head to the side just in time for him to connect on my right cheek. It was terrible. I quickly pushed him back, and he starts to get mad at me, saying that I was such an awful person for ignoring his feelings and not giving him a chance. Bear in mind, not once did I ever say I was looking for a relationship. I even made it known from the start I was only going to be his friend. Heck, scratch that, just an acquaintance really. Let's just say he had quite an anger issue as I pulled away and I eventually returned home. I was genuinely freaked out, so I ended up speaking up about it to my co-workers. The oldest one told me he would speak to Francis personally and not to worry about him again. If he was to cause me issues, he would get the police involved. Again, I should have just gone to the police myself, but I didn't. Now, bear in mind, this is just the beginning. Pretty creepy, but not necessarily terrifying. That's until we fast forward to a day before Christmas Eve. It's just myself and my dog, a retired German Shepherd police canine, and we were on the couch watching some Christmas movies relaxing. I remember at the time just getting off the phone with my dad, who said that he was going to go with my mom to drop some things off at my grandma's house before finally coming home in roughly half an hour. For whatever reason, the thought of Francis came over my mind, but after my dog started to growl and whine, I quickly brushed off those thoughts, and instead I focused my attention to my dog Brock. Okay, well, chances are he might have to go pee. It had been a while up to that point that I had taken him out back. So I grabbed my phone, as it was dark out and I wanted to have the flashlight on, and we head toward the kitchen so I can let him out. Brock wastes not even a single second running past me, and now he heads to my left, just outside of my view. Seconds later, I hear somebody yelling in pain, followed by the words, "Get off me!" My worst fear. Brock had accidentally attacked a neighbor. But then I thought about it. The backyard is fenced in. Why would a neighbor be back here? It's not like they play sports and their ball came over here. So I head toward the noise, and what my flashlight shines upon was quite a shocking scene. Brock isn't just tightly grasping onto some random person's arm. This random person was Francis. Yeah, I wish I could be joking with you, but how did he find out where I lived? And not only that, what was with the knife that now laid next to him that he was trying to reach for? I remember quickly running up to the scuffle, pulling the knife away, and trying to get Brock to let go. At this moment, one of my actual neighbors takes a peek over the fence and he's asking what all the commotion is about. I recall giving him a quick response saying Brock has a hold of a home intruder. I now remember as my neighbor calls for his son to call the cops, as my neighbor hops over the fence to help subdue the creep. Not before Brock tore a new one out of the sweater Francis wore. Needless to say, when cops arrived in my neighborhood, Francis confessed to everything, and he admitted he wanted to break into my home, and he hoped to have caught me off guard at my most vulnerable. Francis was arrested, and as you'd expect, I took everything to court. I don't know how much I'm allowed to share regarding that, but I guess what I could tell you is that he was ordered to never come near me again, and it's a good thing he listened to that, because Francis has never once shown up in my life since. So here we are today. I'm sitting here with Brock next to me as I get ready to email this to the creepy fox. Like I mentioned in my intro, you have to be very careful with the people you meet. There's no problem making friends with people, but you gotta learn to set boundaries early on. Don't be afraid to speak up, hoping you won't be mistaken for being mean. It's better that way, so you don't get taken advantage of. Just my 2 cents, you know? Either way, please stay safe, everybody. This is something truly bizarre, and it does make me wonder the state of people's minds in today's modern era. I don't want to sound mean. That's not my goal or intention here. But I think it's not a bad idea to seek help if you're going through something. That's what I feel was going on here. I won't spoil too much, as otherwise there will be no point in me writing this up. So instead I want to start from the beginning. This happened in January of 2019. I was home alone with my cat and I was in my room re-binge watching all the Angry Video Game Nerd episodes. Suddenly, my mom calls me and tells me she was running a bit late from work and she would have to stay extra hours. A shame for her as she works so much, but at least she kept positive by saying she was going to be offered some extra time off. My mom tells me that if I was hungry, I could go ahead and warm up some of the extra food that was in the refrigerator. I told her that was fine, and I returned to watching AVGN. About an hour later, my stomach was growling, and suddenly the food in the kitchen is sounding appealing. But here's the thing. It had gone bad, and I mean, it smelled like feet. It was chicken Alfredo pasta, in case you're wondering. Well, that was a no-go. So what to do now? I guess I could order something, but ordering is so expensive. You have to not only pay for your food, but then you have to give a tip, and then you have to pay the delivery fee too. Being a broke college kid, saving every little bit I could was a huge help. So I thought about it for a few minutes. Then I told myself, why don't I just walk over to Costco and pick myself up a hot dog and a soda? After all, it's pretty cheap, and I wouldn't be spending over $20 on food. It was settled. I put on my sneakers, grab a light sweater, and I make the 5-minute walk over to Costco. It was fairly packed at the time I got there, about 6 p.m., and once I got in line, I couldn't wait to get my hands on some delicious food. Here's the thing though. While standing there, I couldn't help but notice a man sitting at one of the benches, staring over in my direction. He was full of tattoos, long white t-shirt, baggy jeans, bald shaved head, and goatee. He was very intimidating for sure, and just his presence alone made me feel uncomfortable. Yeah, I know jumping to conclusions about someone isn't nice, but little was I to know my sixth sense was onto something. After I paid, I took a seat at my own separate bench and I started to chow down on my meal. At this point, the man I mentioned had walked away. After a couple of minutes, I devoured my food and I now set my sights to heading back home. That requires me to wait at a red light, cross the street toward a donut shop, head into the alleyway behind said donut shop, and then just a couple of minutes after that, I'm in my neighborhood. When I reach the donut shop, I happen to notice the same man from Costco. He was smoking a cigarette and talking on his cell phone. I remember just silently walking past him, when suddenly, he calls out to me. "Hey, you're the guy from Costco. I wanted to ask you something." I kept walking hoping he was talking to somebody else, but then he mentioned the AC/DC shirt I was wearing. Great. What did he want? I slowed down my pace a little to hear the guy out, as he then tells me he recognized me from somewhere. I told him I'd never seen him in my life before, as I once again pick up my pace and walk even faster. This upsets the man, as he continues to follow me and is beginning to get a bit more aggressive. I'm talking to you. What are you doing walking away from me?" Some vulgar words were exchanged in between these sentences as well. I was now in a full-on jog as I round the corner of my neighborhood when I happened to see one of my neighbors, Joaquin. He was watering his grass as he talked to one of his friends. I ran up to them and I said, "I'm so glad to be home," hoping the creep following me would have heard me and would have left me alone. Instead, he rounded the corner too, and he's now standing at the end of my neighbor Joaquin's lawn, practically asking me to fight him. Trust me, I wasn't going to get into a fight with some random stranger I didn't know. The dude continued to curse at me, before finally he just flipped me the bird and walked away. Joaquin and his friend were obviously confused by the whole thing, but after a quick explanation, they wrote him off as just some random thug looking to give somebody a good scare. I agreed with them. Fast forward a few days later, my mom and I were at Target doing some grocery shopping. All was fine until we exit and we begin to make our way to our car. We noticed a bunch of police officers and police cruisers parked in the parking lot. There was also a crowd forming. We went up to see what all the commotion was all about, and my mom asked one of the bystanders if they saw what happened. They mentioned how the guy in handcuffs had gotten into an altercation with someone and pulled out a knife. Luckily, the person wasn't harmed, thanks in part to some quick thinking by some other good Samaritans. Super crazy. Scratch that. Mega crazy. Because when we see who was in handcuffs, chills run down my spine. Remember the guy from a few days ago who had been following me? It's him. I remember he actually noticed me and he started to stare at me with this look of rage on his face. It's like something snapped when he saw me standing there. Needless to say, when I mentioned the news to my mom of him being the same guy who tried to get me to fight him, she got visibly shaken up. I couldn't really blame her. Anyway, that was my experience. The time I got followed by some thug on my way back home from Costco, only to find out a couple of days later he pulled out a knife on somebody and tried to go after them. Show of hands. How many of you out there work in the delivery business? Any scary experiences any of you have had? And if so, how are you doing today? I pray nobody out there has ever had anything remotely as frightening as this happen to them, because it really does give nightmares. What am I babbling about, you might be asking? Well, here's my story. It was 2015. It's January, the middle of winter, and it's another busy shift of delivering packages to homes, working as a delivery driver. A light snow was hitting my windshield as I drank my coffee and drove to my required destinations. Everything was going as routine. I even remember this one old lady giving me a rose whose house I delivered to. She was expecting a gift for her grandson. That's what I recall her telling me. It really cheered me up, and it reminded me of just how amazing grandmas are. Mine had passed just a year prior to this incident, thus it was a nice surprise. When I made it across town to a more run-down area, I ended up reaching a home that just gave off these really bad vibes. I don't know if there's a way to put it into words. I guess until you experience it firsthand, then you'll know. One of the surrounding homes was abandoned, and I even recall there being caution tape over the house, with what looked to be like bullet holes scattered across the outside walls. It was a bit ominous, but I put it at the back of my mind as I walk up to the front porch. Halfway there, I got spooked when I heard dogs barking at me. I guess it explained the caution sign of there being dogs. Before I rang the doorbell, a man opens the door and then hops out to the door frame. Now, I'm going to visualize him for you. I know some of you might laugh at this, and trust me, I laugh at it too, but it's the best way to describe him. Does anybody remember that episode of SpongeBob where Patrick and SpongeBob are chocolate bar salesmen? Remember that scene with the guy in all the bandages saying he's really injured and breaks his bones in the morning and afternoons? That's exactly what this guy reminded me of, apart from bandages covering his face, of course. The man was using crutches. He He had a large cast on his right leg, and he appeared to be in a lot of pain. I felt bad, which is why I didn't question him when he asked if I could put the box inside his home. Yeah, I know what you might be thinking. Why would you ever do that? Not thinking, I guess. So I stepped into his home, which I remember being a complete mess, as I placed the box, not too heavy by the way, on a nearby dresser. Just as I'm about to turn to leave, I hear the door slam shut, followed by the man saying, "You are the most beautiful girl I have ever met in my life." It definitely caught me off guard, but I nervously laughed it off as I had to leave his home. He was standing in my way, and he wouldn't move one muscle. "Are you sure you don't want to stay a while? I have some extra beers in the refrigerator." I assured him I wasn't interested in whatever he had on offer, as I asked him how he moved around so easily. From what I thought, he was supposed to be injured. Guess that wasn't true, and this was some sort of act. He started to get really nervous and started sweating before I say something that I think made him realize he could get into a whole lot of trouble. "You know, if I take too long, my manager's going to call the cops." Suddenly he moves out of the way, and he allows me to leave. You bet I didn't turn back to say anything, choosing to continue my shift, but then having a nervous breakdown when I clocked off. I couldn't really believe that had happened. Sure, it might not sound super scary, but a few days later, something else happened. I was browsing through my phone when I happened to open Facebook. A friend request, and not by someone I knew. It was sort of hard to tell who it was at first, but the more I looked at his face, the more I remembered. It was the guy I delivered to. I still don't know to this day how he found me, but nonetheless I chose to block him right there and then, but not before he found me on Instagram and messaged me there. None of those messages were inappropriate or warranted any sort of police intervention, just some "hey, remember me?" kinds of messages. I ended up setting that to private, blocked him, and I lived the next few weeks on high alert. In case you're wondering, I did report this to higher-ups, but they didn't do anything about it whatsoever. I guess I could have told the police, but alas, that didn't happen. So let's just say, I ended up quitting a short time later, and I found a better job somewhere else. It was Christmas, 2008, and I had awoke into a bright, sunny Southern Californian day. Excited, full of energy, and full of emotions, prepared to head toward LAX so I could board my plane and fly across the country. That year, I was heading toward West Virginia to spend the holidays with a friend and her family. We would proceed to stay up every night watching movies, playing video games, and telling stories during my vacation there. I would go into more details with the fun and exciting things, including going ice skating, camping, and even feeding some deer in my friend's backyard, but I'm pretty sure you're not really interested with that. Fair enough. Let's focus on the events leading up to my scary encounter, including the experience itself. Now, the reason I chose to fly on Christmas Day was because it was way cheaper. Which, fun fact, if you ever travel during this season, choose the 25th. As you know, most families want to already be together on Christmas Day, which is why airlines choose the lower costs for customers on the holiday. Just an FYI. Anyways, I boarded my American Airlines flight at approximately 9 in the morning, and we took off close to 9:45 a.m. The flight itself was pretty boring, consisting of me listening to audiobooks and having small conversations with the friendly woman who sat beside me. Fast forward to a little past 7 p.m. You have to remember there's a 3-hour time difference between East and West Coast time, and we arrived at the airport on schedule. It had been snowing that evening, so I was bundled up in extra layers with my comfortable boots softening each of my steps. Once I grabbed my luggage, consisting of my carry-on and a small suitcase, I head toward the shuttle system just outside the airport, which was to take me roughly an hour toward the small town that my friend lives in. It was going to drop me off at her mom and dad's bakery. We had planned it this way because my friend, who in this story we're going to refer to as Amanda, and her dad would be at the bakery working on some sweets for all of us to enjoy back at their house. Don't get me wrong, they did offer to come pick me up at the airport, and they insisted heavily it wasn't an issue, but I insisted further that I would take the shuttle to them. So I did, and about an hour later, I'm dropped off at my friend's bakery, and I'm greeted by Amanda. "Where's your dad? Is it just you?" I asked Amanda, as she helps me get my snow-covered suitcase and carry-on into the back room. "Oh, he'll be right back. He went to get some things from home." We proceed to settle inside the back room, and we talked for approximately 15 minutes, catching up and me telling her about my flight. Bear in mind, the lights in front of the bakery, where all the sweets are, including the cash register and displays, are all turned off, and the "We are open" sign is set to closed. So anyway, as we're talking, enjoying some cookies and milk, we suddenly heard a loud shattering come from the main lobby. Amanda and I quickly jump out of our seats, and then we storm through the kitchen door, only to be met with one of the worst sights you could possibly imagine. Two hunky large figures, with black ski masks covering their face, black sweaters, matching pants, gloves, and boots, are now in the bakery, and they're armed. One has a crowbar, the other has a handgun. I remember everything going into slow motion, my life passing before my very own eyes, as the men tell us to be quiet and to show them where the money was located. Otherwise, we would be in a whole world of trouble. Amanda tells the men the cash registers were empty, but the money was in the back room and placed inside a box. The men approach Amanda and I, and we briefly head into the back room, Amanda pointing at said money box placed on a table. While the men have their backs turned toward us, we take this opportunity to book it out of the bakery, jumping through the shattered front window and running across the street to a small shopping center. Naturally, everything was closed. It was Christmas after all, so the overall feeling of being isolated without anybody near us for help as it snowed in the darkness was a very real and scary feeling. Amanda and I both hid behind a large dumpster, keeping a watchful eye on the shop, as Amanda called her dad to warn her about the two armed men. Her dad then asks us if we were safe, and we assure him we were well hidden behind a dumpster on the other side of the street. Amanda's dad then advises us to call the police, and he then says he would be there in about 5 minutes with his shotgun. Too bad he didn't get there in time, nor did the police, because almost as soon as we were on the line with 911, the two men come racing out of the bakery with that money box I mentioned, and then they run in the complete opposite direction, into an alleyway. 20 seconds later, a black minivan, which we assumed housed the two robbers, is storming down the street and disappears into the cold and dark West Virginia night. Sadly for Amanda and her family, they ended up losing a few $1,000s that evening, having to cover costs for the damages and the money stolen. But when all was said and done, they were just so thankful nothing bad happened to either me or their daughter. Nothing was stolen from my belongings, which I was thankful for, as I had all their gifts wrapped neatly in my suitcase. Now, even though we stayed at the bakery longer than expected talking with the police and filing a police report, we eventually returned back to Amanda's house at roughly 2 in the morning to open presents and trying to get our minds off of what was truly one of the most frightening experiences of our lives. Edit. The police never did catch the men, but in what was perhaps one of the greatest acts of kindness, the townsfolk came together to help raise some funds for Amanda's family to cover the losses from that cold and scary Christmas evening. Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for watching today's episode. As always, if you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like rating. Make sure to leave a comment telling me what you all thought. And if you're brand new around here and you haven't already done so, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell beside it. That way you'll be notified of any and all future uploads coming to the Creepy Fox podcast. But sorry if you ended up hearing some noises in the background. Shout out to you, neighborino. I don't know why, but it always seems like whenever I'm recording, whether it be stories, whether it be recording the intro or the outro, he's doing stuff. It's a shame because I'll try doing this stuff at different times of the day, and it always seems like he's doing work. So if you end up hearing noises in the background, I apologize. I'll try to stop and record when he's making noise so it's not too annoying. But so let's see here. I'm recording this outro pretty early. I still have some stories to record for the episode, obviously. This should hopefully be up this weekend. It's December 7th as I'm recording this, so like I said, I should get this out in a few days. A little bit ago, actually what it would be, it'd be a day ago, I uploaded like a 3-hour mega episode. That I mainly did just because I didn't really have too many stories sent in to me. And I'm trying to advertise like, hey guys, I'm kind of running out of stories here. I definitely want to do more episodes, but I kind of have to give you all something, even if they are, if it is a compilation, just because again, lack of stories is going to mean lack of uploads. So if you do have a story that you wanted to share, you can go ahead and send it into my user submissions email, and I'll go ahead and feature it on a future episode. So speaking of episodes, I actually mentioned, not the last one, because the last one was the compilation episode, but the Christmas episode. At the end in the outro, I was kind of telling my channel members like, hey, I'm going to be including some brand new artwork that will be available, as well as sneak peeks for new projects, so you'll be the ones to get those. But something else I wanted to go ahead and offer to channel members. So if you're a channel member, go ahead and listen to this part because I'm sure you're going to like this. And this of course applies to anybody who wants to help me out by becoming a channel member. But what I'm going to start doing now is, along with the early access to new episodes, I'm going to make those early access videos ad-free. So normally what I do is once I upload the video, I'll unlist it. I'll go ahead and make a community post for channel members so they can watch it. But I'll go ahead and include the ads in the episodes. So, if you're a channel member, you're still getting ads. So one thing I'm going to do now is that, I'll go ahead and upload the episode. I'll unlist it. I'll make the community post for channel members. But I won't be putting any ads in there. So then that way, channel members, you can enjoy the episode without any interruptions. I don't know why I didn't think about this anytime sooner, but I guess better late than never. So yeah, going forward, if you are a channel member, and that'll be available at even the lowest option, then you'll go ahead and get early access as well as an ad-free viewing experience. So yeah, that should be pretty fun. Oh yeah, and also don't think I'm not looking out for you regular viewers too, because one thing I started doing as well is I started to do YouTube premieres with my videos. And I think from what I know, I don't know too much about it since I started doing them. I've done them in the past. But as far as I know, YouTube premieres don't have ads either. So for those of you who have been joining me live for the premieres, you've also been able to enjoy the episodes ad-free. So that's kind of a cool little thing there for people that wanted to go ahead and watch the episode. And it's also a little secret for those of you who actually make it to the end of the episode. Make sure to come out to the premieres. I know a lot of people don't tune into this last bit of the video, so they're gonna miss that little hint there. That's why I tell you guys it's always cool to stick around after the last story, because I've always got some cool things for all of you. But yeah, right now my neighbor's making noise, so again, I apologize for that. But right now, I wanted to give my channel members a shout out. Thank you to Robbie, Haiti, Ingrid, Spunky the Nutcase, Bo, Rice and Beans, Scott, and Sean. And of course, let's not forget all you lovely and amazing viewers who come out to watch my videos by liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing the stories with your family and friends. As you know, sharing the videos does go a long way. So thank you for those who do that. Anyways, that's going to go ahead and do it for this episode. Oh yeah, one last thing. Upload schedule wise, I do have a New Year's. I did it again. I'm going to keep that in just because I did it last time. A New Year's Scary Stories video coming, as well as the animation episode coming up. And then most likely there'll probably be one more themed episode coming later this month. So be on the lookout for that. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll talk to you all next time. Take care and have yourself an amazing day.